And I said, I know who I am. I'm Marshall freaking Sylver. I'm a multi-billionaire whose billions have not yet been deposited in my bank account.
How do you build a network, run a profitable business, and make an impact? Oh, and have a personal life at the same time? That's the question, and this podcast is the answer. I'm your host, Chaz Wilson, husband, father of 5, author of the book 5+1, president and co-founder of Master Networks, Inc., a national networking organization. Look, each week I bring you successful entrepreneurs who will share success strategies of how to effectively build a network, add valuable wisdom to your journey, and help you succeed. Welcome to Connect, Share, and Prosper.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Connect, Share, and Prosper. I am so excited today to share our guest, Marshall Sylver, with me today on the podcast. So listen, Marshall is a husband, father of 3. He's a leading expert on subconscious reprogramming and irresistible influence. He's the author of Passion, Profit, and Power. He is the 7th of 11 children, which I definitely want to talk to you about today. Sure. And he has been on many stages and has performed in most of the major casinos in Vegas. That's awesome. So welcome to Connect, Share, Prosper, Marshall Sylver. How are you?
Thank you, Chaz. I'm awesome always. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I want to know about, 7th of 11 children.
Yep.
And so you, the 4 older,
yes.
Boys, girls, like how many boys, girls in the family?
So from the top going down, I am the 7th child born, and I have 6 sisters and 4 brothers.
Wow. So what was it like growing up with a house of 11?
You know, we were dirt poor growing up. So the first house I lived in had no running water. It had no electricity. It had no phone. We had little, sometimes no food. We were homeless twice. And we were homeless in the middle of a Michigan winter. And the local community knew we were going to die living in the station wagon. And so they renovated a chicken coop. And the chicken coop had running water. It had electricity. It had 2x4 walls with a piece of paneling as room dividers. And we lived there for 4 years. And so it was a very modest upbringing, yet it was a really good thing for me because it taught me early on if I was going to get anything in my life, I needed to get it myself.
So when you were young and going through that, by the way, I can't imagine what that was like. Were you like, I've had some people on the show who've had some rough challenges growing up, and like some were very aware and some weren't. Were you aware of like your situation as a young kid, or were you just kind of like happy-go-lucky, like didn't know what was going on?
No, I knew we were the poor family in the neighborhood. You know, and I'd see my neighbors and my friends, they had parents that the mom was able to stay at home with them and the father went to work, and they had nice cars and they had nice toys. And so I was very aware we were poor, which is also why, you know, very early on, I started working full time at 10 years old. And when I say full time, I mean 40 hours a week after school. And it was just the way that it was. And so I didn't think anything ill of it. Did I wish that I had been born into a rich family? Absolutely. Was I glad with the family that I was born into? Absolutely. I've got amazing brothers and sisters, and it's been a good life.
Yeah, I'm sure that, like you said, I'm sure there's a ton of lessons that you learned. So working 40 hours at 10 years old, what were you doing for 40 hours? Like, what kind of jobs were you doing?
Well, back in Michigan, you know, it's a farming community. So back in Michigan, you could crawl through the fields, at least for me, I could, at $1 an hour, and I would weed the corn, and I would weed the carrots and the spinach and the things that actually they couldn't weed without doing it by hand. Wow. Very humble. And I also started doing magic full time when I was 10 years old for money.
Okay, so you started doing magic. By the way, I grew up in Minnesota, so I understand the Midwest winter.
So you get it.
I get it. And so I can't imagine like
that's why you live in Dallas and I live in Vegas now.
That's right.
Exactly.
When I could finally choose, right? Like,
yeah.
So magic, 10 years old. So I'm curious, how did you get into magic, and how did that lead to other things you're doing in life?
One of my older brothers was in Boy Scouts, and Boy Scouts had Boys Life magazine.
Oh yeah.
And Boys Life magazine had an article that taught him magic tricks. I was 7, he was 11. And at 7 years old, we don't have all the same elements that we have as an adult, those presumptions. And so I saw right through all the magic that he did. I took the magic, though, and I showed it to my father. And my father and I never had a good relationship. And I showed him the magic, and it amazed him. It was one of the best responses I'd ever seen in my dad, and I was hooked immediately. So from 7 until I was 10 years old, every single birthday, every single Christmas, all I would ask for was either magic tricks or money for magic tricks. And I ended up at 10 years old, placed an ad in the local newspaper. Since the house that I lived in didn't have a phone, I had to put a phone number in there. And so I went to the local pharmacy, which was about 4 miles away. And I told the pharmacist, if this payphone rings and you pick it up and answer it, and I book a gig, I'll pay you 10% or 50 cents. And so I think he thought it was kind of a cute thing for a little boy to do. And I would check in with him every couple of days. And sure enough, one day I checked in and somebody had called in to book me for a show. So I called back to book the show. And the person that was wanting to book me said, we know you charge $5 for a 30-minute show. What would you charge for a 45-minute show? I said, oh, that'll be $7.50. So I booked my very first professional gig at 10 years old, made $7.50 for the 45-minute show. The show was at a local camp for mentally handicapped kids. And it was, again, as they say, the rest is history. I was completely hooked. Now, not only could I do something that I really loved, which we all should figure out, I also got paid for it. So not stopping.
So it started, what I heard you say was it started because of this tremendous, first of all, you could see through the magic. You could see how it works. It clicked probably really fast for you. And then you got this reaction out of your dad.
Yep.
And so that I'm sure something there stuck and you're like, okay, I get this reaction out of him. I wonder what it will do with others and so forth, right?
Very much, and it wasn't just that. Because we were so poor, I would often have to wear my sister's clothes to school. And this song is killing me right now, by the way. Just joking. And the challenge with that is that, I didn't have a whole lot of self-esteem. I knew we were poor. Everybody else knew that we were poor. Yeah. And when I would get on stage, though, I would crush it. And I would be in my element, and I'd get admiration, and I'd get respect, and I'd get, people paying attention to me. So it was something that all my years of my youth, I've loved being on stage. My 3 babies were all born at home in the Vegas house, in the bathtub, via hypnosis, no drugs, no doctors, no pain. A lot of people would say they were conceived via hypnosis too, and I won't argue with that. And the thing about it is that from the time that I could hold them in my arms, they've been on stage. So they believe being on a platform, being on a stage is a natural place to be. In fact, the biggest challenge is getting them off stage once they've stepped on because they love it so much.
Yeah, following your footsteps. Okay, I want to ask you about hypnosis just for a second. But before I do, I want to ask you, because I love this, what's the graffiti behind you?
I'm here we live in Las Vegas full time. I have a second home, a vacation home in Southern California. I'm actually in the theater of the beach house, and it's just done in very Moroccan chic. Okay. So the original person that put together the theater, they did graffiti on the back wall. So while it's graffiti, it's extremely expensive graffiti.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool. It's a cool background.
It's fun.
Okay, so let's talk about hypnosis. And I don't really know much about it. So and I don't know if many of my listeners do. So I'm going to come at this completely. And even if I do, I'm going to make no assumptions. So by the way, is that what you did on stage in Vegas?
Yeah, I've been on the main stage, as you mentioned, of most major showrooms in Las Vegas. The last showroom that I was on the main stage was Planet Hollywood. And I've been in Vegas since 1994. I did an infomercial in 1994 called Passion, Profit, and Power. I produced it for a $10,000 budget. We did $120 million in sales the first year. Wow. And the whole idea behind it is kind of like what you're asking me about. Hypnosis is the non-critical acceptance of ideas or concepts on a subconscious level. I say you do, no question. Most people don't realize that they walk around in a state of trance all the time. It's all those things they hold to be true. And sometimes people hold to be true that they are a millionaire, even if the money has not yet been deposited in their bank account. Some people hold the belief that it'd be hard to become a millionaire and be successful and get everything that they want. And the fact is, whatever you believe to be true is true for you. So as a stage hypnotist, as an entertainer, I'd get on stage and entertain people and show them, how people could be reprogrammed to think they were Elvis Presley or walk on broken glass. Or one of the things that I do in the show is I'll take 3 petite women, hypnotize them, place them on supports for their necks and their ankles, and then walk up their bodies like a human staircase. And then at the end of the show, I say, hey, if you loved what you saw, and I know that you did, and you'd like to learn how to use this in your life for better relationships, more money, emotional, mental, physical, and even spiritual well-being, why don't you come back tomorrow? And I'll teach you how I did everything that I did, and then how to apply it in your life.
Wow. My mind's racing, like all the different things. So you did that on stage, and how did that translate? Like, I know you're doing a ton of things with helping business owners and consulting, and that. Where did that go? And how did you get from being on stage hypnosis to that? That's curious to me.
Well, I was doing my first corporate gig as a hypnotist was for Kentucky Fried Chicken. And it was a bunch of the franchisees, and they just wanted me to do an entertainment show. And I got up, did the entertainment show. And when I got done, one of the franchisees jokingly walked over to me and said, "Hey, can you hypnotize my employees to get to work on time?" I said, "No, but I can hypnotize you to communicate better so they will."
Oh.
And he kind of sat back and looked at me oddly. He said, "How much would you charge me for that?" Well, I'd never done a seminar. I said, "I'd charge you $25,000 for the day." And he said, "Well, can we bring 10 franchisees together? We each pay $2,500. I said, "Absolutely." And I realized in that moment that while I loved entertaining, and I still love entertaining, in fact, I acquired a theater right here in Carlsbad in San Diego County that we're going to put a permanent show into. While I love entertaining, I also realized what I love more is changing people's lives. And because it's a business, I certainly can charge more to change people's lives than to amuse them for an evening.
So walk me through just a high level. So you get with a group like this, the 10, and what do people hire you to do? Like work through making more money, improving the relationships, or do you do all of that?
Yeah, all of the above. Money cures most things. When I start working with somebody, that's the first thing we solve is we say, okay, how's your money situation? Yeah. Because a lack of finance is the leading cause of divorce. It's the leading cause of stress, anxiety, heart attacks, and such. So what I do is I help people understand how to make money. And money isn't magic. Money is math. And when you understand money is math, what I mean by that is when you give people value in a way that is meaningful to them, they'll want to give you money in return. If I said to somebody, "Hey, I'd like to free you up 40 hours a week from having to do any kind of housework, anything that is a minimum wage activity, would you want me to do that for you?" They'd say, "Of course." Now, obviously, there's a price tag somewhere in there where it makes sense. If you got to pay $1 million a week to have your household managed, that wouldn't be worthwhile. Yet if you're paying somebody, I don't know, $1,000 a week to manage your household, that's all that extra time that you have. And time is the great equalizer. It's the one thing that most people don't realize. No matter how wealthy you become, you have the same amount of moments in a day as somebody that's broke or somebody that's richer.
So true. So you work with these business owners and you're helping them, number one, like you said, get their money right, which I agree with you. Like, it's so interesting when you sit down and you talk to people that you can either start there or it all boils back to that at some point, right? So what do you think the number one skill or thing that every entrepreneur, every business owner must possess? They must have that thing that they must do to be successful.
There's 3 steps in getting anything we want in any area of our lives. The first is self-mastery. You've got to get your own head on straight. Since communication equals wealth, and we only communicate in 2 ways. First, internally, those 1,500 words per minute that are going through our brain, telling us who we are and who we aren't, what we can be, what we can do, what we can have. The second thing, though, is you need the tools for the task at hand. Everything that we want has a specific set of tools. If we want better, more passionate, intimate relationships, there is a set of tools for that. If we want to be a better parent, there are certain tools for that. In making money, the number one tool is learning what I call irresistible influence. And irresistible influence isn't just getting somebody to buy something from you. Irresistible influence is getting someone to beg you for what you're selling and have them believe it was their idea. Have them come to the realization that they must have what you're selling and believe it was their idea. And then the third step in getting anything we want is understanding that you could have the proper mindset, you could have self-mastery, total control of your thoughts and emotions, you could have the proper tools for the task at hand. The challenge is if you don't take action in the present moment, you'll never win because tomorrow never comes. And that's where most people get stuck. They're a business owner or they're a real estate investor or they're anything, and maybe they're actually really good at what they do. The challenge is they didn't become good at selling what they do. They're not really good at accepting money. Often, they, especially friends and family, say, "Oh, I'll do this for free." And my belief is that when we put money at stake, that thing has more value. We pay better attention.
So true. Like, I remember a story my dad had told me one time. He was at a convention and the guy on stage was talking about the money and the value, right? And he said that when he gives his business card out, he charges people $1. They're like, "What, $1?" And he said, "Yeah, you'd be amazed at how many of my cards don't end up in the trash can at the back of the room because somebody paid $1 for it." And so he said, I don't know if it was $1, it might have been $10. I don't remember what the amount was. The point was he charged something for it. So at the end, he's standing around the guy that spoke, and a lot of people are coming up and saying, "I really loved what you said. can I get your card? And he's like, yeah, it'll be $1. And they're like, oh, that's funny. He's like, no, I wasn't kidding. Like,
Right.
and the point of it was, and I'm not telling everyone they should go charge for their card. The point was they put value on that piece to what you were saying.
Yeah, and what the bottom line is our net worth is always determined by our self-esteem. So
Yes.
one of the things that I do for people is help raise their self-esteem, help raise their relationship to money, turn them into people of influence so that they can sell anyone anything at any time. And more than that they actually fall in love with it. Because when you believe in what you're selling, you have a moral and ethical obligation to sell it.
Oh, so
and that's
true.
what we do.
Yes. When you believe in it, for sure. So
Absolutely.
we have people listening today. Guys, we're listening to Marshall Sylver. If you are watching this, you're seeing the cool graffiti behind. And if you're not, you're going to want to go
the
back.
halo effect on my head.
Yes. If you're not, you're going to want to go back to YouTube and check this out, or Facebook. Before I go too far, and I'm going to ask you another follow-up question to that, but how can people connect with you? Social media, whatever. How can they find you?
They can find me on Instagram at Marshall Sylver. That's 2 L's in Marshall and Sylver spelled Sylver. They can also go directly to my main website, which is sylver.com. My last name, Sylver.com. And in fact, we've got some goodies for at least a couple people that get over to Sylver.com as quickly as possible after this broadcast, and claim a very special surprise for me.
Oh, that's awesome. Thanks for doing that for our people.
You're very welcome.
That's fantastic. So guys, rush over there. Well, again, if you're driving, listening to this, make sure you're safe, because we get a lot of people that say, I listen to this in the car. So you wait till you're safe, then get over to the website and get those. So let's talk about one thing I found when I was, connecting with you is this thing about balance, time. Like, I'm a father of 5 and running multiple businesses, and it seems to be one of the biggest challenges. I think I do okay with it, but it's always a challenge. How do successful entrepreneurs who are listening to this, who I know always that's the biggest challenge, like they feel guilt if they're working, if they're not at home, whatever it is, but when they're at home, they feel like they should be working. How does one balance that?
There's a couple things that worked for me. It used to be that when my 3 babies, and then I've got a son that's 8, a son that's 6, and a daughter that's 4. And my wife is one of the most grateful human beings ever. And I've always said she's the best decision I ever made in my whole life. And whenever I would go to do what I needed to do to generate revenue to feed us, she would tell the kids, thank Daddy for working so hard. Thank Daddy for working so hard. And so they would always say, thank you, Daddy, for working so hard. And the gratitude felt good. And then one trip, I was gone for 22 days to China. And I was doing events over in China through an interpreter, hypnotizing people through an interpreter, 5,000 to 10,000 people at a time. And every single night, we have cameras all over both properties. So I can basically follow the kids around the house, or we can, check in on things either at the Palace in Vegas or at the beach house. And I would check in on them and drop in and say hello while I was in China. And they would always say, thank you for working so hard, Daddy. Thank you for working so hard. And there was one point where I'm over there working and they're going to Legoland, they're going to the movies, and they're playing out on the beach. And I thought, my gosh, I am working hard. You guys are having all the fun and I'm working hard. Plus I'm missing you. Yeah. And so when I came back, I realized that what at first had been an endearing thing for my small children to say had been programming me to think something that I had never thought of as work in the past as work. So I told my wife, I said, please, can we change those semantics? I know it's a spirit of gratitude, and that's the reason you're having them say thank you. Could you tell them thank you, to say thank you for loving us, Daddy, rather than say thank you for working hard? So number one, it's having a grateful group around you, your family, your spouse, the people, and letting them know that you appreciate them saying thank you. A lot of times people go work hard and some people take it for granted and they just don't say thanks. I've requested that my family say thank you. Second thing for me is I make sure that I keep that balance. My wife and I, we play racquetball or tennis every single morning without fail. I don't let anything get scheduled on top of that if I can help it. So I make sure that, number one, we get exercise in. Number two, because we're exercising together, she and I get some alone time. We get to play, we get to have fun, we get to be with each other. I have offices in both cities that we're based out of. I also have offices in both homes. And the reason I have the office at home is I prefer to work from home. I prefer not to have an 8-hour stretch of work and then a little bit of time for my family. What I prefer is a couple of hours of work, a little bit of time for the family, more effort, little time with the family, and then make sure that we are definitely scheduling both date nights and family days consistently throughout the week. You know, at the end of the day, that's all that's really going to matter is
Yeah.
how was your relationship with your significant other? How was your relationship with your kids? And I grew up in a broken home, and there are 4 different fathers for all the children. And so I didn't really have a father figure there. When my father decided to jump back into the equation, he just wasn't kind to me. He wasn't a nice man. He didn't know how to be a dad. And so I swore if I ever had kids, I'd make sure that they had high self-esteem. I'd make sure that they were constantly complimented, that they were recognized for the unique, amazing human beings that they are. You know, early on, when my kids would do like a jigsaw puzzle or something like that, even at 2 years old, we would have them put their hand into the air and say, "I'm a genius. I'm a genius."
Yeah.
Because the only distinction between geniuses and morons is that they know who they are.
No,
You know, a moron will look at a circumstance and say, I don't know how to do this, you know, and I'm a moron, probably never will figure it out. A genius will look at the same thing and say, I have no idea how to do this, yet I am a genius. I will figure this out.
Oh, so good to get, you know, especially kids. I mean, like I said, I have 5 and you know, they go to school and other kids pick on them, or they don't test well and they feel like they're dumb. Like you said, I'm a moron. I don't know this. And you just cannot pour enough confidence into a young child to that. And so I imagine, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say that's part of the challenge is that my kids are homeschooled, and they're homeschooled for a reason. Even with the nannies, every once in a while, a kid will pick up some phrase or some habit, and we have very specific language patterns that we use. We don't use the word try. We don't use the word can't. We don't use the word but. We don't use the word if. And because we changed all the semantics, if they start speaking in such a way that is not what we want them to do, I immediately ask my wife, where did they get that? Was it their karate instructor? Was it the nanny? Where was that? Then sit them down and say, here's the reason we don't use those words in these circumstances.
Mm-hmm. And then it's helping them understand that words matter.
Yep.
Helps them understand their own, like you said, their conversation internally, which is what you're talking about, one of those tools and so forth, the self-mastery, right? If you can master the conversation internally, that you know, comes out externally, the way your actions go up, right?
Yep.
There's so much I feel like I want to dig into. So because of honoring both of our time, I want to hit a highlight here. So I want you to just envision for a second the person listening to this podcast is a, you know, a mom, a dad, maybe a single mother, single father, but they're probably a solopreneur. Maybe they're hiring their first employee. Maybe they have a couple of employees at best. We don't have a lot of big businesses that are part of our membership and part of our organization. They're the backbone of a local economy, right? So hopefully I'm painting a picture. They're up against a lot, right? They got a lot of pressure and a lot of things. If you had an hour with them, right? And I know we don't have an hour, but like, what would be something you would leave with them that you'd want them to walk away with each day? Because just like the kids are getting beat up, if you will, man, a lot of these entrepreneurs are getting beat up every day.
Yep.
What would be something you would share with them to say, what would it be?
One fire at a time. Just put out one fire at a time. Even when you start to feel overwhelmed and it feels like everything's going wrong, maybe the business is struggling, maybe your kid's having a tough time, and the trash needs to be taken out and all these things need to get done, is just focus on one fire at a time. Take care of one thing, then take care of one more thing, then take care of one other thing. And to also recognize that ultimately this too shall pass, that everything is temporary. You know, I was born extremely poor. I became extremely rich, wasn't really smart, became poor, fairly poor again, became rich again, married the wrong person, became poor again, brought my fortune back, leveraged heavily in real estate, and then found myself not quite as rich again. And one of the things that I know is that if you took all the money on the planet today and you spread it evenly amongst all the people, within 5 years, it would be right back in the same hands. Because the people that know what to do what they need to do. The people that squander continue to squander. And it's always temporary for me. And this is a real big thing for me. I was married twice before I met my one true wife. And I'm glad that I was married twice because it let me know what marriage could be so that I know the blessing that my one true wife is. And so when minor stuff comes up, we get over it really fast. She's a lot younger than me. I'm a really good hypnotist. And so, she wasn't married before me, and she didn't really have a whole lot of relationships before we met. And so it's kind of a good thing for me to be able to point out to her we have a blessing here. We are blessed. Our kids are amazing. We're blessed. And when we met, we've been together 12 and a half years now. When we met, I was rolling in the money. And I had a point where I was leveraged. We were leveraged. And my wife turns to me one day. She said, honey, we don't need two houses. We certainly don't need a 17,000 square foot house. How about, this is just with the boys. We hadn't had the daughter yet. She said, how about you and the boys? We sell everything and we just live in a 1-bedroom apartment. That'd be okay with me. And I looked at my wife and I realized there would never be a question in my mind whether she was with me for money or whether she definitely loved me. And it's recognizing that everything happens for a reason and it serves us. So when you're feeling overwhelmed, maybe you were going to the airport to leave on a flight and your flight's delayed 2 hours, finding your life less than perfect is a waste of your time. It is what it is. And I know that's very Zen, like the wall here, yet it is what it is. And coming from a place of viewing your life as it's unfolding perfectly and asking yourself, okay, the flight's delayed 2 hours. Who here was I supposed to meet? Or the flight's delayed 2 hours. Thank you, God, for steering me clear of that flock of seagulls that would have flown into the engine and crashed the plane. Right. Again, it's coming back to being married twice before I met my one true wife. I had to go through those things to get to the level of appreciation where I am now. I had to have fortunes and not have fortunes and have fortunes and not have fortunes to recognize that everything is temporary. So I'm not attached to being wealthy. I'm not attached to being broke. I'm just very grateful that I ate today, that I am protected, and that my family loves me.
Thank you for sharing that. So by the way, for those that are listening who maybe are on the upside right now and who are experiencing wealth, what would your advice be to them that might save them through a downswing that maybe you experienced? Was there any was there a big mistake you made there or what happened and that you would give advice to somebody who's in that spot right now?
I fly privately. I fly charters exclusively. I don't really like to fly commercial. If it's a long haul, if I'm going to China, I might fly commercially, yet I like flying privately, especially with the kids, but on a day-to-day basis. And one of my pilots that I use on a regular basis that's based out of Carlsbad, on one of the trips, I'm flying back to Vegas and I'm by myself. I'm the only one on the jet. And so I went up to the cockpit and I sat beside him. And he says, Marshall, I've known you for a while and I've seen you have some ups and some downs. He said, you're a lot like another guy that I know. He's extremely wealthy and then he's not wealthy. Then he's really even more wealthy and then he's not wealthy. What goes through your heads when you've lost your money? And I said, I've never lost my money. I've been between fortunes. And I said, I know who I am. I'm Marshall freaking Sylver. I'm a multi-billionaire whose billions have not yet been deposited in my bank account. You know, and every one of us, we are one idea away from $1 billion. And when you keep coming back to that certainty, when you keep coming back to that enjoyment and savor the wanting as much as the having, I would say to anybody that's got fortunes and they want to protect them, number one, diversify. You know, part of my thing was before I started having kids, it was just me. And because it was just me, I say no risk, no goodies. I'm always going to be one to risk. And even my own children, I want them to understand that while we have wealth now, anything can happen to any one of us in any given moment. And we need to acknowledge that and not become attached to stuff, not become attached to, you know, all the trappings and the fine cars. If we've got them, awesome. If we don't have them, I traded in my my Mercedes convertible for a swagger wagon. You'd call it a minivan. I call it a swagger wagon.
I got it, yeah.
And in the moment I started driving around in the minivan and the value of what was inside it was so much more valuable to me than what was around me. I lost all connection. I still have nice cars. I drive a Rolls Royce Phantom in Vegas. I drive a Maybach Mercedes here in San Diego. Yet I have zero embarrassment driving around in the town and country with my kids in tow. It just doesn't mean anything anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good. Like, so what I'm hearing you say is you've got to, while you're still looking for how you can grow and make more and all that, you still have a great sense of gratitude for what you have, especially probably because of the background as well that you came from, right? I mean, you understand, you've been in both places many times. And so you understand that piece of it. Marshall, like
the biggest piece of advice I would say to anybody, if they want to maintain their wealth, make sure you understand this concept that while the faucet can be turned off at any time, you need to be sure that there's a plug in the stopper. You need to be sure that you're accumulating something. And it's not living beneath your means, it's living at your means, just making sure that you have one called savings, an account called investing, that you are growing, that you're eating chickens while you're hunting for elephants.
Oh, it's so good. Like, I think that's probably the piece I couldn't agree more. Like I look at a time early on, I mean, in my early 20s, I made a lot of money. I was really good in the real estate game that I was in. Then a 2007-8 hit and overnight, right? Like a lot of people.
Yep.
But what I wasn't doing is I always thought it was always going to be that good. I mean, I don't know why I didn't learn from anyone else, right? That lesson. But now as things get better and better, I'm putting that aside and I'm investing in all that stuff to your point. So I love great advice.
I was watching Shark Tank, and there was an entrepreneur that was attempting to get money from the sharks. And Cuban asked him, he said, have you ever had a successful business? And he said, I had a really successful business. I was making millions of dollars a year. And then 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013 came along. He said, I lost everything. And Cuban said it. This is a multi-billionaire. Cuban said it. He said, most people lost a lot. So don't feel bad that you lost during that period. And it's just, again, it's not being attached to either side. You know, I live in Vegas and they say, don't chase money. Don't let frightened money go after good money. There's a time if somebody is sitting down at a blackjack table and they're losing, they need to stand up and walk away. There's a time in businesses that, you know, sometimes you have a business that flourishes for years, yet the economy changes, technology changes, desires change. You've got to be willing to let go of your ego and say, you know what? Enough's enough. I'm walking away. We're going to change gears right now. Yeah.
So good. Guys, we've been blessed today. Marshall, thank you so much. Like, I wish we had all day, but you know, there's so many things. Again, let me recap, guys. There's so much good stuff here I love getting into self-mastery, something we talk about all the time. Guys, focus on self-mastery, the communication, the tools that you need to do that. At some point, we'll come back for a follow-up episode. I'd love to talk about irresistible influence in great depth and get our audience exposed to that. And again, I'm sure we can learn more going to your website to learn more about that. And then take action. Like, take action. Do it now.
Do something.
Yeah. You've been blessed today. Go find Marshall. It was sylver.com is his website.
Yeah, Sylver.
And we'll put that in the show notes. Make sure you guys can get links to that. Go get the goodies that he talked about. You'll get offered at his website and connect with him on social media, on Instagram. Marshall, again, thank you so much for being on Connect, Share, Prosper.
Awesome, Chaz. Thanks for having me.